Hello, this is Levistra, the Dragon in Cyberspace, coming to you with all news, tips, and tricks in the gaming spectrum. While most people want to talk about Assassin's Creed Shadows and the likelihood of Ubisoft being bought by Tencent, I decided I want to cover something different about Ubisoft, and it's in regards to something that I strongly believe in, I think most people believe in. The concept whether or not you own your game, as Ubisoft was proud to mention a couple of years back. Well, it seems like in an ongoing lawsuit, we have some news developing, as the game developer reports. Ubisoft tells the Crew players they never actually owned the game. Now, I want to point out that this is a great precedent because if they win, then a lot of companies can go on to the argument that we never own our game. It gives some justification, corporations justification to fully own things rather than selling things to us. And they will harp on digital media in that sense, because now digital media means you don't own the game. However, if they lose, that means that yes, players own their games and that you misled and failed to provide a service and owe a debt to your customers. At least that's how I'm reading this. Let's continue, shall we? The company says in an ongoing lawsuit concerning the Crew shutdown is based on faulty assumptions of video game ownership. Faulty assumption, you say. When I buy something, I pay for it. That means it's mine, right? I didn't go get a loan for this. Ubisoft has issued quite a rebuttal to a pair of players who are attempting to sue the French publisher for shutting down multiplayer racer The Crew. Last year, 2 players in California filed a lawsuit against the company for permanently shutting down the title, claiming they and thousands of others have been left with a skeleton of what you thought you paid for. Exactly. They essentially argued The Crew should have been left in a playable offline state rather than being delisted and taken offline. Ubisoft claimed it was necessary to wind down the Just 14 release because of server infrastructure and licensing constraints, but noted it had maintained support for almost a decade. For those players in California, it was a decision they felt totally barred access to the product they paid for. Imagine you buy a pinball machine and years later you entered your den to go play it, only to discover that all the panels were missing, the pinballs and bumpers gone, and the monster that proudly displayed your unassignable high score is removed, reads the original lawsuit. Turns out the pinball machine manufacturer decided to come into your home, gut the insides of the pinball machine, and remove your ability to play the game that you bought and thought you owned. Yes, that's actually a very good analogy. That's the crucifix of digital media, or any games in general, and this lawsuit regarding The Crew. Ubisoft put the kibosh on the idea of outright ownership. In a response filed in February, Ubisoft suggested the argument that The Crew would be remaining playable indefinitely is misleading, and claims it was explicitly selling temporary access to a product rather than outright ownership. Plaintiffs do not allege that Ubisoft made any statements indicating that consumers would, in fact, obtain unfettered access to The Crew if they purchased a physical copy, reads the company's response. To the contrary, the packaging made clear that Ubisoft could limit access this fatal to plaintiffs' FAL, UCL, and CRL claims. Plaintiff's theory of the case is based on the faulty assumption that buying a physical disc entitles purchasers to infinite access to play the game. There's the agreeing with the crop breaker. There's the core of your argument. This is what's dangerous. If the court rules in favor of Ubisoft, for my understanding of the line, I'm not a lawyer, but this is what I'm understanding from it, right? This means that every game that you played, whether it be on Steam or physical copy, you don't own the game. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that they don't have no responsibility to the customer. They came up with a game and they didn't think about the long-term repercussions that they eventually had to shut down a server or couldn't afford the resources. They didn't think that far ahead, and they're trying to shirk accountability for that. No, you promised a service, and you did not make this clear, apparently. But when customers buy something at a store, regardless if it's online or, oh, I don't know, in person in a brick and mortar store, they bought that product. I'm not leasing my mic to talk to you guys. I didn't commission these dragons just so I can give it back later. This Dragon V2 model. Nothing I own was leased. I own it. And I was not a slave to a corporation in that regard. It's mine. Now, when I use my streaming software, right, I'm paying for the right to use it. I can still use Rumble Studios. I can go to YouTube Studios and do the same thing. I can find a freeware version I could use. So that's different from buying an actual game or an actual product. I'm using a subscription-based software that I am also told and led to believe and made sure I was understood that if I don't keep the monthly payments up, I can no longer multi-stream or use certain software. That's what they're trying to get. That's what they're trying to argue. Is like these games are like that kind of software, which is the most shadiest and vile and horrible business practice you can use. Ubisoft claims the flawed assumption doesn't equate to misrepresentation under California law. And if you want to know about the California law, I do have a video on that. I will do my due diligence to add it in the thumbnail title in the corner of the screen, so that way you can read it yourself. But I can go over it. Last year it came out. It got a lot of views, and people, there's a lot of people who did read. They just read the title and like, but it was actually good because it was actually more consumer friendly. The company reiterated it was selling a license to a product as opposed to ownership rights. No, when you sell your product, you didn't sell a license. Sorry. So even back in 2014, people were under the assumption they own the game. This is uncommon in the video game industry, but the lawsuit highlights a fundamental divide between the companies selling those licenses and the consumers making purchasing decisions. The plaintiffs have since responded to Ubisoft's arguments with a photograph of Cruise packaging, which notes the activation code for the title won't expire until 2099. Well, there you go. They're fucked. The claim is an example of Ubisoft indicating the crew would remain playable during this time and long thereafter. But what do you think, viewer? Who do you think's in the right? Do you think you bought a license to a game, or do you think that when you bought something, you own it outright? Do you think Ubisoft's in the right, or do you think the players are on the right? Let's have an interesting debate on this, and put your thoughts in the comments below. Seriously, I really want to hear them. After all, happy gaming.
Worlds clash in endless collision. Gaming news with a fierce precision. With a spark so wild it breaks the norm. In the tempest eye of cyberstorm. Reclaim gaming and Dragon Cast. Fire breathing wide, screaming loud. The Vistro's here to shake the crowd. Psychotic dragon rain.